Alright, welcome back. My name is Maxim Smith, and I've been the beta tester for an alternative college called The Preparation for the last 3 years now. And it's been going very, very, very well. Honestly, it is the best possible choice um, as an alternative college. Absolutely. The results have been amazing. But I want to talk about a topic that comes up, is bound to come up in the preparation for anybody actually doing it. But the topic also reflects directly on life itself. There's no difference between how you'll face it in the program versus how you'll face it in reality, because actually you're dealing with reality in the program. Um, but that's the topic of loneliness. Now, I think if you look at any of the great men throughout history, any of the men who actually did something exceptional with their lives and were exceptional people, maybe they invented something that changed the world, or maybe they actually just conducted themselves in a way that was outstanding, that gave the people who came after them a clear path, or at least a much clearer path, of how to walk through life, how to conduct themselves, and how to look at the world in a new way, through a new lens. And we could use, you know, Benjamin Franklin as an example of somebody who did many things to shape the material world around him, and he did shape fundamental life philosophies. But against him, there's somebody like Socrates, who is best known for the fundamental life philosophies. And if you have studied Socrates even a little bit, I recommend reading the Apology, which is about Socrates on trial in front of the 30 Spartan tyrants after the Peloponnesian War, after Athens was taken over, because that'll give you a clear idea of who Socrates was, what his character was like, and the changes he had to the people around him due to the way he conducted himself and due to his philosophy, and how that has lasted for thousands of years is exceptional. But all of these men, and I think Socrates would have had a much better time with this specifically, but all of these men undoubtedly would have had to come in contact with something that anyone who does anything on an individual level will face, and that is loneliness. Loneliness is bound to come and stare you down face to face if you do anything independent. And that doesn't just mean any entrepreneurial endeavors. Of course, if you start a business, there's a good chance that the people around you are going to wonder what you're doing and wonder why you're spending your time on something that initially you're probably making less than minimum wage from. So you're going to have to deal with that, which is already isolating. But you're also in the dark the entire time, with no one to actually guide you where to go or exactly what to do. Or you probably have very minimal guidance, so you have to figure it out all yourself, all by yourself. But not just that. I think anything done independently, a life lived on your own code, is bound to come in contact with loneliness. And you can also see this in great writers like, people have mixed feelings about him, but Ernest Hemingway, I think, is a great example of this. Louis L'Amour as well. I mean, he lived an exceptional life, a very interesting life, growing up in the Great Depression, working through the Great Depression. And he was alone much of his life. He had to constantly learn new things and new jobs, and was surrounded by people he didn't know. It would have been a very lonely experience at times. And so when you're in the preparation, you are going at it alone. I mean, even though we have a notable number of people doing it now, it's still an independent task. No matter what, no matter if you end up, uh, getting friends to do the preparation or meeting other people in the preparation, and maybe doing a few cycle with them or a couple cycles with them, maybe going to EMT school together or going to Boulder Outdoor Survival School for their 14-day wilderness expedition. Even if you do that, about 95% of everything is going to be independent. You're going to be alone. You're going to be in strange places, doing things you've never done before, learning skills you've never learned before, surrounded by people that you don't know, possibly in places where they don't speak your native language and you just have to figure out your way around. Maybe if you go to, a lot of people speak English in Thailand, but maybe if you go to Thailand to train Muay Thai in the fighter course, that's, at least for me when I did it, it was a very, okay, I'm very, very alone sort of experience. I've never been to this place in my life. I'm learning something I know nothing about, surrounded by people who don't speak my language and who I share almost nothing in common with. And I definitely felt very alone doing it. But of course this translates, like I said, directly to living an independent life and not walking a path that the majority of people choose. You just have to, frankly, loneliness is undoubtedly going to come your way. It's not something you can avoid, but it's also it can be, at least, a very positive sign that you're on the right track. I remember in the beginning of the preparation, when I first started trying to beta test it and see if it would all work out, I was very alone. At that point, 18 years old, I had 0 friends around me. I was living with my mom in Idaho in the very beginning. We knew nobody there because she had just moved there not too long before. And for the rest of the time we were there, we knew nobody there. I had no friends there. And the only person who actually supported me throughout the preparation, would offer constant encouragement when I needed it, constant guidance when I needed it, was my father. And I was very, very, very lucky, and I'm very, very lucky to have him, like, unbelievably lucky. And I know that if I didn't have that source of wisdom, guidance, and encouragement, that it would have been, I wouldn't have continued down the path, because every once in a while you just need somebody to say, yeah, I know everybody around you is confused about what you're doing. It doesn't make sense to them, but don't worry about it. You're doing good things. Look at all you've done already. You've gone to EMT school, you became an EMT, you're learning how to become a better rider. You got your first job and actually worked your first job. You're making some money. You're learning how to play guitar, chess, whatever. At least that's how it was for me. You need that source of encouragement, and that's why I hope people in the preparation can offer it to one another. But throughout most of the preparation, I have been basically entirely alone. Just in terms of being out in the real world and doing things alone. Very rarely would I see friends or do things, and part of that was just because the friends I had in the very beginning didn't live around me, so I just ended up losing contact with them. They went off to college, did their own thing, Um, but I gained friends along the way, and it got better. But throughout most of it, I was entirely alone. I didn't, like I said, didn't have friends around me. There were periods where my family would call my dad and say, "Is Maxim okay? You know, we don't really understand what he's doing. He went to EMT school, he got the certification, but now he's moving on to something completely different. I, I don't, we're worried about him." So even there were periods where even my own family were had criticism for what I was doing, and were very uncertain of the path I was taking. They just didn't get it. Um, but that's part of things, and you just have to deal with it. Honestly, it's a fact of life that anyone who does anything independently is going to feel alone. But there are some other things you can do other than just suck it up, because that's what you have to do sometimes. I will say though, that's it's a very tough thing to just suck it up, because there have been times in the last 3 years in the preparation where the typical kind of steady background manageable loneliness became so much worse all of a sudden, like flaring up, because I was in an even more isolated position. And that has at times caused me to, at least in my own mind, kind of fail at what I was doing, because it felt so uncomfortable that I tried to do what I could to leave the position as soon as possible, the uncomfortable situation as soon as possible, in order to get back to a greater level of comfort, which was a failure in my mind. But over time, like I think about this last time that I was gone for a month, left Uruguay, was in the States, went to a survival course, went to a rope rescue course, and then worked on a wildfire for about 10 days. Um, I I could much more easily manage the feeling of loneliness and the difficulty that comes from it. It became so much more easier to manage, and it didn't feel like a major problem anymore. But besides sucking it up, there's there's two things you can do, and one of them is a tangible thing, a material thing that you can do, and that is write. This was something my dad talked to me about when I was in Thailand, actually, because I felt very alone there, like I said, and I told him about it. And then he told me a story about how when he went to basic training for the army, it was just pure suck for, what was it, 6 weeks or 8 weeks? I think it's 6 weeks for the army. But just pure suck. No fun moments, no moments of relaxation. Everything is uncomfortable. You're surrounded by people, lots of strange people. You're treated very differently in a way you've never been treated before. No part of the experience was fun or comfortable. But he said the thing that he did during that time that was beneficial was right. He wrote about what was happening day to day, what he thought about things, how he felt, and that kind of, it changed his mental thought process and the view at which from which he looked at the current situation. Instead of being stuck in the present moment, where he feels very alone, lonely, extremely uncomfortable, where he is literally suffering, and it sucks. By riding, you're bringing your thought process up to 30,000 feet and looking at the situation from above, analyzing it from a different perspective, and riding from a perspective. I mean, you naturally do this when you're reflecting on things you're doing in the moment. You're riding it from a perspective of your future self looking back on it, at least for parts of the riding. I mean, I'd imagine when you're in basic training, if you're going to write about what's happening, you're going to say, this sucks. We got woken up at 4 a.m. We were on a ruck march. It was about 80 pounds. We did it for 20 odd miles or whatever. And it just sucks. So some parts of it are going to be very in the moment, still focus on the moment. But overall, it's that 30,000 foot view, which takes you out of the inner prison, which is a falsely made, imaginative prison of momentary pain and difficulty. And that is something you have to do. That's also part of the reason why we recommend people riding weekly updates in the program, because you need to, being alone and going at things alone, very difficult. You run into lots of mental blocks, lots of things you have to overcome, all in your head, basically. The outside external stuff going on in the real world, or in the outside world, is much more manageable than the internal difficulties that you'll face. So going at it alone, you need to keep that 30,000 foot perspective and go, yeah, this week sucked and it was difficult, and I've been putting in this many hours, or this course I'm doing didn't really pan out exactly how I thought it would. But then go 30,000 feet, and now it's, oh, I've been learning to do something I never thought I would do. I went to a place I never thought I would go to. Maybe I met these great people who I never would have met if I didn't go here. I did something that was fundamentally difficult, and now I possess the fundamental foundational levels of a skill that so few people have. I'm walking away from this as a better person. 30,000 foot view changes everything. But the last thing you can do, and this is more of a complex thing, and I tried to explain this in a presentation I gave this past Saturday, and I don't think it was understood, which was not the fault of the person who asked the question that brought the topic up. It was just the fault of me not explaining it well. But going through life and going through the preparation, you need to train yourself over time, and all of these things take lots of time. Some of these things take years. I just want to help you. If it's going to take you 2 years to learn something, if you didn't have any external input, any guidance, I want to bring it down to a year, if possible, just by trying to explain this and trying to get this in your head. You need to be outcome independent of the outcome. Much easier said than done, especially given the way we think about life, especially in the West, where it's how you measure yourself is largely based upon your output and external tangible achievements. And it's hard because in the preparation, you're trying to make as much progress as possible, trying to learn as many skills as possible, trying to make as much money as possible within short periods of time, trying to learn as much about a skill within a very short period of time to get to a level where you feel and actually have reached a foundational level of competency, and trying to do it as much as possible, huge amounts of volume within very short periods of time. And that's all external, tangible things. So it's difficult. And you need to keep two things in your head at once with this idea of outcome independence. Well, going through life and going through the preparation, you do want to hustle. And you do want to get as much done as possible. You want to be as productive as possible. You want to have high amounts of output, whether that be creative output or just grunt work, working whatever job you might have. You do want to have that hustle mindset, that go, 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 kind of low level anxiety, anxious feeling in your stomach, at least most of the time. That is a good thing. And for young men, that's what we need. It's not even what we need. We feel the feeling of anxiety and drive to do something, whether or not we're actually doing it. Hopefully you are doing it. So you need to have that one form of thinking, that one thought process. But on the other end, you need to hold something in your mind, an idea in your mind, which contradicts the other thought process. And that is outcome independence. When you're going around and doing things in the real world, let's say you've been pursuing a path for a while, trying to put in lots of effort into learning something and doing something and improving your position in life. Let's say ultimately you want a job. You know exactly what job you want. You know how it's going to benefit you if you have it. And let's say you don't get that job. You're devastated. You prepared for the interview. You felt like the best possible candidate that this firm, this company, this business could have. But for whatever reason, they didn't pick you. Now, the outcome dependent person is going to look at that situation and go, man, I put all this time and effort into this and it went to waste. I didn't hit my goal. I didn't get the outcome that I desired. But the outcome independent person looks at the situation and goes, well, I didn't know whether or not I was going to get the job in the first place. That's entirely out of my hands. I, was a great interviewee. I did what I could. I studied as much as possible. I learned a lot. I worked a lot, and it didn't work out. And now I have to figure it out and see where I'm going to go next. I'm going to adapt to the new situation. And I'm not attached to the outcome because it was out of my control. Or in the preparation, you may have the desire to hold on to a certain outcome, like hitting the goals of a specific cycle within the specific 3-month time frame of each cycle. And I'll give you an example for this, an example of when I was outcome dependent. This last year, using Thailand as an example again, I went into it not even really caring about the fact that I was going to an interesting country and going to do something that would improve me physically and mentally. I didn't even think about it. I was just so focused on trying to check the box of completing the cycle. And in my mind, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to spend a full month and a half in Thailand, and I wanted to fight. I wanted to fight an actual Muay Thai fight in the ring. And that was all I thought about. And the process sucked. The actual process of being there, despite the fact that I was in an interesting place, doing something interesting, around some good people who I met there, who I was very fortunate to meet, despite all the good things happening around me, my mind wasn't focused on that. Despite the fact that I was improving, I didn't think about it. I was so focused on the outcome, and when things went south and I got some pretty bad staph infections. Got sick a few times within just the 3 weeks I was there. Felt bad. When things went south, everything went out the window. I didn't hit the 2 goals that I wanted to hit, the 2 goals that I was dependent on hitting and reaching the outcome of staying there for the period of time I intended to and fighting. I didn't hit it. And so for a while, I just felt like I completely lost, and I felt very disappointed with how things went. But as time went on, I think just a couple of weeks later, I realized that I was entirely dependent upon the outcome, and that what had stopped me from doing it was also out of my control. I mean, I got a staph infection, which got pretty bad. It turned into, I think I had multiple different infections, actually, training, and it turned into a type of staph infection called Staphylococcus aureus, and it spread over my entire body. And you definitely can't train with a staph infection, but absolutely not with a staph infection that bad. It just wasn't gonna happen. And when I realized that, my mindset and perspective shifted on the 3 weeks that I was in Thailand. I realized that I did what I could with what I had where I was, and things just went south, and that's how it is sometimes. Not everything is gonna work out, and I think people will just find that out for themselves when they actually have more life experience. But the other aspect of outcome independence is the aspect of openness, imagination, creativity. If you're outcome independent, you're not so focused on the numbers, the chances of success, or hitting a very specific goal, because pretty much all of that is outside of your control. Instead, it's focused on what could happen. What could happen? What has happened? What could happen? What has happened, just like I said a few minutes ago, this situation happened, it didn't go right, but look at all I got out of it. Or it did go right. It actually went way better than I expected, and I got so much more out of it than I ever thought I could. But the what could happen portion of outcome independence is where the magic happens, because that's where you look at something you're planning, like a cycle you're planning. And the one that immediately comes to mind for me, where this did happen, I just didn't realize it at the time, was the sailor cycle. I'm not a fan of the ocean. I'm not a fan of water. If I go in any body of water, I want to be able to see clearly what's around me. I'm not somebody who would ever go on a sailboat, or would have ever gone on a sailboat in the past. But when I planned the sailor cycle of joining this expedition sailboat for a competent crew Royal Yachting Association course that sailed from the Falkland Islands, did an ocean crossing, and then ended up in Punta Arenas, Chile. When I just pictured the thought of the possibilities of that in my mind, it was interesting. The idea was romantic. I knew it wasn't going to look exactly how I imagined it to, but I was okay with that. And I made up a story, just daydreaming about the possibilities with this thing, despite the fact that at the time, it seemed like something I might not necessarily like. But when I thought about how the process could go, not the outcome, but the process of learning something new could go, it made it all so much better. And when I actually got to the sailing course, when I was in the Falkland Islands, when I got to sail for the first time and actually learn about it, the process was enjoyable. It was actually like a romantic story in of itself, the kind of thing you see in movies where things just happen in a very interesting, dynamic way, and there's a story comes out of it worth telling, and a lot of good comes out of it. But that was from a time when I was outcome independent. I wasn't focused on getting the certification. I didn't even really care. I didn't even need the course to last a certain amount of days, cover a certain amount of hours. I was just focused on the possibilities of what could come from it. And that is one of the major antidotes to loneliness, is viewing what you're doing in a very different light and thinking about the possibilities in a different light, and having a level of positivity for things and kind of a childlike wonder. It sounds silly, but it's true. A childlike wonder for what could happen, what could come of the things you learn and do. And when you bring the riding plus the sucking it up sometimes, and learning how to do that, plus the outcome independence all together, and no matter how long it takes, your circumstances improve over time. Just thinking back to where I was in the beginning of the program, where I had nobody around me, basically. I had one source of major encouragement. I had no friends who I constantly saw or frequently saw, to where things are at now, where I have friends literally all over the world from what I've done. And some of them are around my age, but I also have friends who are in their 30s. I have friends who are in their 60s. From meeting these people, doing these things in the real world, it's just good things have naturally come out of this, along with a increased sense of self-confidence, which naturally comes from competence. So when you're in a strange place, it has less of an effect on you, because you can look at what you've done, at what you've learned, where you've been, the difficult challenges you've endured, and you can be more content with a difficult, uncomfortable situation, and know that you can handle yourself much better than most people. That is the way to get over loneliness. It's bound to happen. It's bound to come to you. It's just a fact of life and something that we all have to face. But like I said, it's actually an indication of something good. Everyone, think of any success story from any entrepreneur ever, and it's always the same. It's the idea of the 10-year overnight success. It maybe it was a decade before anybody recognized them for anything. Maybe it was 3 years, maybe it was 5 years, maybe it was 15 years, and they had very little support from the people around them. Maybe they had one major source of encouragement, two if they were really lucky. But as time moved on, as they kept pushing through the difficulties, the challenges, good people came to them. Good people recognize when other people are doing substantial, productive, impressive things and are of goodwill. Good people will come to you over time. You have to push through. You really do. If you don't push through, you're not going to make it through the preparation. And from the good I've seen come from it at this point, that might be one of the biggest that might be one of the biggest failures of a person's life, actually. Because the good that can come from the program is inquantifiable, not just on the social or friendship aspect of things, but also on the potential financial aspect, the character aspect, becoming much more like the man you want to be, and on the skills-based aspect of having a huge list of skills and accomplishments over a 4-year time frame that would typically take people between 15 and 20 years, possibly more, to do. If most people put sincere effort into learning those things, it would still take them about 10 to 15, maybe 20 years. But most people never do these things, half of these things, in an entire lifetime. But again, the overall good, all the little things that you can't measure, make it inquantifiable. Something you can't quantify or measure. And that's to not push through the difficulties to get to that would be a failure. And you'd regret it, actually. Down the line, you'd regret it. But I hope this has been helpful. I know this topic has been coming up for a lot of people in the preparation specifically. Like maybe 3 or 4 people all at once facing it, and that's just because, given the time frame of where a lot of these people are at in the program, they've already done things and made solid progress within it, but early on, especially the first year, absolutely, is very tough in that regard. But that's not to call any of those people out, not to call any of you guys out. It's a sign of something good, despite how it may feel. It's a good sign. So anyway, hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.